Good morning, guys. I'm actually... Oh, that's super wide. Do you know what? Just go ahead and kill the slides. There's nothing there anyway. Yeah. So, because it's a tech conference, and actually because it's too early for me to be able to read what's on this thing, I'm actually going paper on you. If anybody wants to meta heckle me, my Twitter handle is Custom Deluxe. So, yeah. The name of my talk is Tiny Gods and False Idols, and toward the end, I'll tell you why. But first, a little bit about me. So, I'm Louisa. The name of my company is Superhuman Limited. And that's not because we are necessarily superhuman, but because we believe that technology could give us all superpowers if we apply it correctly. And we do that by putting people first. I've been working with technology since 1997, and I've been playing with it since a long time before that. I first learned to code when I was 11, which was, just to totally date myself, a little bit before BASIC came out. I haven't written code in ages, but I was a design director during the first dotcom boom, and suffice it to say that I've seen loads of stuff: ideas, technology, code bases, design trends, loads of things come and go. And the whole time, I've been interested in the same basic things. How does it work? Why does it work that way? What's it for, and what else could it do? What does it mean for people? And most importantly, what's the point? So this conference is all about some of the most important areas of technology today. Big data, the Internet of Things, fintech. All these things could change our world in the way that we live in it, completely, for better or for worse. And obviously, I would prefer it be for better, and I have some ideas of how that might happen. So, first, bold statement. We currently have a gigantic, enormous, epic-scale, massive expectation management problem. This is the biggest challenge that we face at the moment. The gap between what we expect technology to do, hope it will do, believe it will do any day now, and what it actually can do right now today is actually massive. We love Rosie the Robot. We fear the Terminator. But in reality, what we're closer to war games than we are to Star Trek. We're not there yet. The problem is that we idolize technology, exactly as Arthur C. Clarke predicted. Right? The third law: any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. We quote that all the time. But how often do we stop and think what that actually means to us, what that means for us as people? We're all people, right? Even though we're all technologists, even though we know this stuff isn't magic, sometimes we kind of act like it were. We kind of wish that it were. And perhaps our biggest misconception is that technology can, or will soon, or even should, think like we do. It's a long-standing tendency. This is normal. Since before we had computers, this was always the case. Whenever we, humans, encountered something that could do things that previously only other humans could do, we ascribe it human characteristics. We anthropomorphize. And in the tech world, there's loads of evidence for this. I mean, there's been a Twitter feed for self-aware Roomba pretty much as long as there's been Twitter. Both of the Mars rovers had Twitter feeds that were running in the first person before they even launched. And it's fun, it's great. It's great to characterize technology in this way. But when we take it too seriously, when we carry that over into our work as technologists, as designers, as makers of things, we can cause a lot of trouble. And not just because it leads to disappointment. Bad things can happen in lots of different ways when we put the emphasis on the machines rather than on the humans. And I'm going to talk about 3 of those habits this morning. First, we have a tendency to not look at the bigger picture, which to some degree is understandable, because who's got time? I mean, we're all under so much pressure to get our products out the door to market as quickly as possible that we barely have time to look at the thing that we're making, let alone everything else that sits around it. However, the reality is the things that we make live in the world, in people's lives, alongside lots of other things. And when we don't think about that, things get messy, really messy. One of my favorite ways of talking about this is considering the kitchen as battlefield for technology. So someday, really someday, I'm going to have my kitchen redone. And I started thinking about this about a year ago. When I have my kitchen redone, what if I get those, the mechanical blinds? You can control them from your iPhone. They're already on the market. Get some of those. And then obviously I'll want the latest coffee making technology. That'll have a temperature sensor that keeps the milk fresh as long as possible. And I'll have my plant pot, my click and grow. That has my herb garden in it. That'll have a solar sensor as well as a water sensor, keep my basil alive while I'm on the road. I'll want something else solar powered. I don't know, I've heard toaster, kettle, dishwasher, all kinds of things. I'll want to have one of those because I'm reasonably conscious of the environment. And obviously I'll have my Nest, my thermostat. And then I thought, hang on a minute. Someday, in late May, when it's beautiful and sunny outside in London, rare, but happens, and I'm on stage somewhere halfway around the world, those four things, the coffee maker, the solar-powered thing, the plant pot, and the Nest, are going to go to war over whether those blinds should be open or shut. The coffee maker wants them shut because it keeps the milk fresher longer. The Nest also wants them shut because it's going to get hot in here. But the plant pot and the solar-powered thing want them open because they need as much light as possible. And who mitigates this? Me. I'm going to be on stage somewhere, and my phone in my pocket is going to be going mad, going, I'm open, I'm shut, I'm open, I'm shut, I'm open, I'm shut, I'm broken. And then I thought, right. I tried to imagine what it would be like to go into all of the control panels for all of those individual things and try to figure out the right combination of settings that would keep these things from fighting with each other. And then I remembered that I can't even be bothered to change the time on my cooker when the clock goes forward and back by an hour, and I thought, there's no way it's going to happen. That happens, I'm going to turn everything off. And I'm a geek. So what are normal people going to do? They're not going to put up with that kind of mess. So it's actually important that we think about the bigger picture. And when we think about things in terms of, instead of what objects can we put the internet into, what can we make connected, we think about it instead in terms of what people want to do in that same kitchen, mitigating factors start to present themselves. So let's take me, for instance. I'm pretty into cooking. I cook a lot for my friends. I spend a lot of time in my kitchen. There are some things that I really wish I could do better. For example, I would love it if I could get timing right. If anybody here is into cooking and done big 3-course meals for friends, you know this happens so often. Either the meat's done too soon and then you have to keep it warm and it goes dry, or the vegetables are done too soon and you have to keep them warm and they go mushy. Nothing ever comes out exactly right. This is something technology could help with. It could help me figure out what the cooking times are, remind me when I need to put something on or in the oven, etc. I might have my cooker talking to my oven, talking to my mixer, talking to my pots and pans even. This is something that technology could help me with. And all of those things would be working together around this problem that I actually have, this thing that I actually want to accomplish. When we think holistically, we have a better chance of getting things right for people, and getting things right for people means we have a better chance of being commercially successful. So, instead of messy, holistic. Number 2, another bad habit that we really need to break is oversimplification. So, Einstein famously said, or is credited with having said, everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. Those last 3 words, those mean everything to me, but no simpler. This is playing out in all kinds of ways already. I don't know if you guys saw it, but last week there was an article in Fast Company written by Don Norman, who's one of the gods of usability from way back in the dark ages of the internet. And he was talking about how Apple's sort of new commitment to minimalist visual design is making its products less functional, less usable, less accessible for people. Whether you agree with that or not, I'm certainly having increasing difficulty working with the machines. But even apart from that, think about how much worse this is going to get when most of the technology that we engage with every day doesn't have a screen. Embedded in the city, embedded on our bodies, embedded in our homes. This will lead to the places that we live feeling mysterious. A friend of mine told me this story, and I ask him every time what the name of the guy is, and he probably tells me, and I've forgotten it again, but he swears this is a true story, so this is a true story. There's this guy, German guy, inherited a house from his dad. And his dad was big into technology, and his dad connected up the house, basically. Instated all these controls, lighting would go off and on, heating would go off and on, the sound system was controlled all in his own special little set of ways. Obviously, he did not expect to die, and when his son inherited the house, there was no manual. So he'd be at home, and lights would go on and off unexpectedly, and music would turn up and down, and the place would get cold or hot, and he had no idea how to change it, and no idea why it was happening, and he found himself living in a mysterious place. Who wants to live in a mysterious place? I don't want to live in a mysterious place. That's what ghost movies are made of. But we're already part of the way there. Earlier this year, a woman called Kara Pernice wrote an article, she's a technologist, about how she grew to hate her Nest thermostat. And I find this such a great example, case in point, of this idea of making things mysterious by oversimplifying them. She got a Nest, she lives in Boston, and she did the whole setup thing, the Nest started to learn her patterns, and when she came home from work, etc., and everything was working out fine, she loved it, and then they had the coldest winter ever on record. And she would come home and it'd be cold. So she would manually turn up the temperature and sit down, start reading. A couple of hours later, the Nest would reset to appropriate levels, normal levels. Eventually she gave up because she couldn't find the deeper setting to recalibrate, and she wound up sitting in her house with a blanket most of the winter. She now hates her Nest, is getting rid of it as she moves, and will never buy another one, or will think very, very hard before she buys another connected thermostat. And she's a technologist. It's not like she's somebody's grandmother who doesn't understand how to work with these things. And here's the thing. Yes, that's an edge case. It was unforeseeable that Boston was going to have the coldest winter on record and that all the settings would have to go out the window and be redone. But those edge cases, especially when we're talking about people's homes, people's bodies, the places that we live in, and most especially when we're talking about something that doesn't have a screen to explain to us what's happening, those edge cases are really important to people. And when we oversimplify connected products, whether they've got screens or not, what we're effectively doing is locking the users into only the things that we can imagine them doing. And even then, only in the ways that we can imagine them doing them. And that's kind of not okay. People are unpredictable. We are, among other things, natural-born hacker monkeys. And give us anything, and we'll find some purpose for it for which it was not designed. There was a picture I used to use years ago when I was still doing slides and stuff, that was of a photo of a guy opening a beer bottle with the business end of a USB stick. And a couple of years after I used it, I went out and searched for that photo again, and I Googled USB stick open bottle. I did not find that picture. What I did find was hundreds of different styles of one-end bottle opener, other-end USB stick, and I thought, I wonder, did that product actually come out of watching people do that crazy shit? Because if it did, that's brilliant. This is it's a great example of human unpredictability inspiring a new product line. Genius. So my point is that if we want to avoid being mysterious, we need to leave the things that we design somewhat open. We need to design systems and products and services that enable people to engage with them in a way that makes sense to those people, not necessarily to us. And that's not just to make the customers happy, it's also to bring us new ideas. Sometimes people's ideas are better than mine, and I wind up adjusting what I do based on the feedback that I get. So to avoid being mysterious, we need to be humble. We need to accept that we can't foresee every possibility. We need to accept that we are not always in charge of everything and in control of everything. And we need to be willing to learn from what people do. So, not mysterious, but rather humble. And third and finally, the third habit that I want to talk about has maybe the scariest implications. We have a tendency, as I alluded to before, to expect that machines will be able to do things just like we do, that they'll be able to make good decisions for us, that they'll be able to help avoid bad things happening, that they'll be able to stand in for us in meaningful ways. And of course, they can do all of these things, but only to a limited degree. And if we Yeah, anybody who's ever dealt with Siri and sworn at Siri at length will tell you that machines are nowhere near human yet. And maybe they will be, but they're not there yet. And if we design things based on this assumption, when the technology isn't there yet, these things can become malicious rather quickly and dangerous. Take, for example, relatively mild example, self-driving cars. We're hearing that cars are going to drive themselves any day now. But they're not really going to drive themselves, are they? I mean, what will happen, they're going to be able to handle some bits of journey without much intervention, but there will still need to be a driver present, and there will still need to be a driver engaged and ready. We're still a really long way away from individual commuter pods where we can, George Jetson style, drink the coffee and read the paper. And definitely a long way away from when the car can drive you home when you're drunk. Which is a shame, because I would love that. See, in an ideal world, this thing and my car would work together to rescue me from potentially bad situations. I'd be standing in a bar and my phone would say, "Louisa, stop talking to that man. You will regret it in the morning. Put down the cocktail and back away slowly." And then my phone would call my car, and my car would pull up outside and say, "Come on outside, I'll take you home." This would be brilliant. But it's not going to happen anytime soon. It might not happen ever. I'd love for it to happen. But a self-driving car as it's currently being developed, the current trajectory, is closer to a horse than it is to a friend picking you up. Just like a horse, it knows where it's going, more or less. And just like a horse, if the terrain is predictable, it doesn't need much input from you. But also, just like a horse, when it runs into something that it doesn't expect and it doesn't know what to do with, you have to engage or bad things will happen. Look at it this way. As long as human beings are on the road, unexpected things happening is pretty much a guarantee. And we have been developing, as a comparison, autopilot technology for airplanes for literally a century. The first round of autopilot tech for aviation came out in 1914. I didn't know that until I looked it up a couple of weeks ago. I thought it was like 50 years. 100 years we've been working on this stuff. And aviation is a way more controlled environment. I mean, you're in a plane, you don't have pedestrians wandering out in front of you, you don't have cyclists cutting you off. Well, it is known where every single plane in the sky is at any given time. And still, unexpected shit happens. And still, we need pilots to be present and to be engaged, or very, very bad things happen. So technology is advancing, but it's not yet becoming more human. And that's because these things in here, are not software. And our lives are not made up of data. Our lives make lots of data, yes, but we're not made of it. Our lives are made of thousands of tiny decisions that we make every day, most of which we're not even aware that we're making as we're making them. And even if we are made aware that we're making them, we don't know why. I mean, some of you walked in this morning and I'm sure had a conversation with somebody that you didn't know. How did you decide who you wanted to talk to? Can you say? How did you decide which seat you were going to sit in? How do you know when or if to trust somebody in a meeting? We make these decisions, and we're not even aware of how we do it. Cognitive science has been trying to figure it out for hundreds of years. And so to think that we can teach machines to do it like we do it when we don't know how we do it is a little bit silly. Doesn't mean that machines aren't clever, doesn't mean that they're not advancing. It just means that they're not advancing like us. Anecdote. The guy who coined the term artificial intelligence, called John McCarthy, he invented that phrase in 1954. And that year, this was part of a proposal that he submitted to the university where he was studying. He said, I'm going to actually make sure I get this right, he thought that it would be possible to make significant progress toward creating machines that could learn and use language, form concepts, solve problems only humans could solve, and improve themselves. He thought this could happen, and I quote, "if a carefully selected group of scientists work on it together for a summer." For a summer! Obviously, this did not work out. And when he was asked many years later why it didn't work out, he said, "Yeah, turns out artificial intelligence is harder than we thought." Really? So I'm not suggesting that we stop trying, that we stop working toward AI, that we stop implementing machine learning, that we stop all of this stuff. What I am suggesting is that we think about it slightly differently. If we can reframe this stuff in our heads as being helpful rather than a replacement for us, we avoid a lot of ugliness. If we think about a self-driving car as a horse and not a person, it's a whole different set of expectations. And once we adjust those expectations, we can make things that work nicely, work well with and for humans instead of trying to replace them. So we can avoid being malicious by looking to be helpful. Because technology is neither the cause of nor the solution to all of life's problems. If you watch The Simpsons, you will know that Homer Simpson says that that's booze. Technology is a tool. It's a set of tools, a vast array of tools that can be used in an almost infinite number of ways. They can be used by anyone, by the great and powerful, by the downtrodden, by good people, by evil people. And it can have an impact, no matter who uses it, and that impact can be seen or unseen. And when we make technology, for those of you who've been wondering this entire time where the hell my talk title came from, I'm now paraphrasing Derek Pawazek, who's been around the magical interwebs as long as I have, and maybe longer. He wrote a couple of years ago, "When we make technology, we are tiny gods. We create something out of nothing. And in that universe, we say when it's sunny and when it rains. And the tiny universe complies." The thing is that these tiny universes exist in the real universe, and with and for all the people who use them or whose lives that they affect. And though we may be tiny gods, we have our idols too, the technology that we idolize, the technology that we love. And that might lead us astray if we focus on it too much. So, when we collect and use data, when we put the internet in more things, when we connect the world to a greater degree, when we reinvent the way that we live, which is what we're all doing every day, we should be careful that we're making the universe better for people. The big universe, not just our tiny ones. Holistic instead of messy, humble instead of mysterious, and helpful instead of malicious. So, with that, I invite you to enjoy the rest of today and tomorrow, and to then go forth and put people first and make amazing shit. Thank you.